I want to see this. I mean, he just pops to the smoke, and it's just the crispy aim that we know Forsaken has available, right? Massive multi-frag, great transition, mechanics that...
Why are Paper X playing Brimstone on one of the biggest maps in the entire map pool? Brimstone on Breeze? What is that? And why are other teams that are having success playing Brimstone on giant maps like Abyss? What has happened? But before we get into Paper X's Breeze, I just want to take a quick look at Brimstone's history in the meta because it really is pretty shocking. If we go back to Masters Bangkok in 2025, we can see that Brimstone had a 100% pick rate on Bind and Fracture and 0% pick rate on every other map. We go to Champions in the same year. We can see Brimstone had a 77% pick rate on Bind and 0% on every other map. And this trend is going to continue. Here's a map pool where Bind and Fracture were both out of it, and Brimstone had 0% pick rate at Masters Toronto. We go back to 2024. Brimstone, again, shows up on just Bind, 75% pick rate. Champions 2024, again, Bind, only map that Brimstone's getting played on. What about 2023? Okay, Brimstone, Bind, Fracture, and a tiny little bit of Pearl. I think one team played him on Pearl like 3-4 times. 2023, again, Fracture, Bind, nothing else. So why is this agent that has such a limited range on his smokes suddenly being played on some of the biggest maps in the entire map pool? And the answer is that there's a number of reasons. But the first place that I want to look is just at the raw statistics of Brimstone's abilities. The first place that I want to look at is just at the smokes category. So if we look at the wiki, Nebula Astro Smoke, 14.25 second duration. Ruse Closed Smoke, 13.5 second duration. Harbor and Omen Smoke, 15 second duration. And then Brimstone, 19.25 second duration. So an additional 4.25 seconds over every other smoker in the game. Now, why is that relevant? Well, if we look at Omen Smoke, for example, we can see that in the most recent patch, at least the big patch that happened, there was a cooldown increase on all rechargeable smokes from 30 seconds to 40 seconds. So an additional 10 seconds of downtime for these agents that do get multiple smoke sort of phases per round. Brimstone, of course, only has 3 smokes total for the entire round, which is why his smokes last longer. But this increased cooldown time now makes Brimstone smokes that much better because they last longer. So you have longer uptime on the ability to cover a specific choke point or block vision as you execute into the site. And then, of course, if we look at Brimstone's other abilities, we have a stim beacon that gives you a 10% speed boost, which allows you to rotate faster across large maps. He has a long duration molly that's very good for post plants or stopping rushes. And he has an orbital strike, which is one of the better post plant abilities in the game, or just fighting abilities in general. And if you've been watching VCT this year in 2026, you know that we're kind of in a fighting meta. We're seeing a lot of comps being played that have double duelists in them. We're seeing, Yoru +1, Waylay +1, Neon +1. And so we're seeing a lot of comps that want to just explode onto site. And that's kind of what Brimstone's playstyle is built around. That's why he's been so popular on maps like Fracture and Bind, where the ability to just, at a moment's notice, explode with full smoke coverage is very, very powerful. Now, another thing that Brimstone is very good at is playing post plant, and this sort of pairs in really well with the current style of play. You hit the site early, you get the spike down, and then what do? Well, your option is to either keep fighting for more space, which is pretty risky, especially when you've used all of your utility to hit the site, or you can play post plant and stall the other team from defusing the spike. So Brimstone has longer duration smokes, which gives you longer to set up for your post plant afterwards. He also has some of the best post plant utility in the game. So he really is sort of slotting in perfectly to the way the game is currently being played. And the final point that I want to make before we look at some examples is that when you have an agent that's really good at bursting sites and you're playing that agent on large maps, it again kind of synergizes really well because the defense is going to be super spread out across the map. And on these larger maps, a lot of teams tend to be playing retake on one of the sites, which again makes it even easier to get into a post-plant scenario. So what you really have is an agent that synergizes perfectly with how teams want to play attack and also works pretty well with how teams want to play defense because he has great stalling utility and is pretty good at explosive retakes as well. So let's look at some examples of how PaperX is using this agent on Breeze. So in this first example round, I just want to quickly look at Forsaken's buy. He has a Ghost and 3 smokes on pistol round. So you can already tell what the game plan is here for Forsaken. He has 3 smokes to delay, and if we, do the math, it's almost a minute of potential smoke time if he wants to just chain it as a one-way on this box or smoke off a choke point or whatever exactly his plan is. Another thing that you'll notice is that he's being played in a double smoke comp. So Viper is controlling the smokes on B, and Brimstone is controlling the smokes on A.
By Varel too much, just like our desk was mentioning, but
so right off the bat, you can just kind of see what Forsaken's game plan is. Just drop a smoke right in the path of where potential players might be. It's on top of the orb. It's going to make it difficult for GE to get the orb without feeling afraid that somebody could be in the smoke or playing the other side of it. They might have to spend extra, utility resources to get through this. And that's going to give Forsaken plenty of warning to maybe drop another smoke in the choke point in response.
So as soon as they see that then there's nothing hanging around the cannons, they can just send it back over towards A. Strong side Yoru also means that you can, TP him over, so they're kind of ready for this.
And you can see that's exactly what happens. GE has to spend a teleport to get through the initial smoke. They have to use all of their players to kind of make a coordinated move. And then they're met with immediately another smoke. And again, another thing about Brimstone is that the cast time is almost instant, right? Some of the other smokers in the game, the Astra Stars have to load, and then you can open them. The Omen has travel time. And so with Brimstone, you just click, and then within about, half a second, there's a smoke there. So it's really, really fast and responsive, which is, again, great in the current meta where everybody is kind of, getting a little bit of space and then just exploding onto the site. So at a moment's notice, you can respond with smokes. And right here in round 4, we can see Forsaken has dropped the one-way smoke on this box in the beginning of the round. This is something that we actually saw briefly on even Icebox. There was 1 or 2 teams that were playing Brimstone on Icebox, and they had a similar theory, which is that there was a specific spot on a site where you could one-way it. And because Brimstone smokes last for so long and you can re-up them instantly, you can almost have 60 seconds of denied space, or at the very least, you can make sure that the other team has to use utility to clear the area. And right here, you're going to see sort of the power of Brimstone being able to stop and execute. We've got a Yoru ult being used by Global Esports, and Forsaken is just going to chuck a molly in the choke point. And you're going to see that the entire GE team is stuck. They're going to have to use a teleport to get out with the Omen. They're going to have to use a veto teleport to get out as well. 2 players are still stuck in the choke point because this molly is, a ton of damage, and it's there for 7 seconds on the ground. So he's able to buy his team quite a bit of time to rotate, and it's going to allow him to make kind of a crazy play. And this is another thing that Brimstone is really good at, where because all of your utility is so easy and fast to use, and once you use it, you don't get any more of it, so you don't really have to worry about your life, you kind of get to become a duelist at some point in the round. And that's what we're going to see from Forsaken right here. So he's just going to sit in the smoke, biding his time. You can see his molly has kind of made everything a little bit complicated. It's forcing GE to, really kind of overextend and push into backsite at a weird timing because they weren't able to scale correctly behind their Yoru ults. And that is what is going to allow Forsaken to make a play like this, where he can just pop out of the smoke as everybody is wrapping around behind him and kill 3 people at an unexpected timing. And this round is going to be another great example of just sort of the reactive and kind of annoying nature of playing against a Brimstone. We see the one-way initially. GE smokes off the entrance because they just want to deny PaperX the ability to know what's going on. They're just going to push through the one-way. But they've also kind of stalled themselves out here with their own smoke, right? When the smoke is about to dissipate, Forsaken is going to take a close angle. And then when the drone comes out, he's going to react by putting a smoke here, which is just really annoying to deal with, right? The drone has a very hard time clearing this because of the near sight when you're inside the smoke. It's at a really super random spot that he just, popped out instantly. And so the drone is going to basically be wasted if it tries to clear this entire area, because he could be playing, in any number of these corners. And as a result, GE is going to just go ahead and use the drone. And then they're going to leave because they're a little bit afraid of what could be waiting for them on the other side of the smoke. And on this round, we're going to see another great example of how sort of reactive and in the moment Brimstone can play. So Forsaken was alone on the A side of the map. Global Esports decided to go into B through tunnel. And so he has to rotate over through middle to be able to use any of his abilities. Like the range is too short to actually help his team. Luckily, there is a Viper on the other side of the map that is controlling that site. But in response, and in the middle of his rotation, Forsaken is going to use his orbital strike to cut up the attacking team. And yes, it is only one person that gets caught on the other side of the orbital strike, but it's going to play a big role in how this round plays out. Watch. So the Astra gets stuck on this side of the orbital strike, can't scale forward, and that's going to allow Forsaken to catch up to them and kill them, cutting off the extra reinforcements for the site. This is going to be a huge problem for Global Esports as they try to secure the site, because now another player gets picked off and we end up in a 1v2. Forsaken is then able to flank around and close out the round. Okay, so we covered some of the defense ideas on Breeze. Now here is the attack side, which generally speaking should probably be the easier one. We're going to see Paper Rex holding in A main for quite some time, and then when they decide to go, just like that, boom, 2 smokes drop out of the sky, and they have a bunch of angles covered now, and they're able to just quickly execute in with a big explosive push. All right, and this round is a really great example of the difference between Brimstone and the other agents in terms of his smoke duration. So you can see both smokes get dropped right at the beginning of the round, as soon as the barriers drop, because they're executing with this Yoru ult from something. However, in response to this noise, they get counter paranoid by the defense, and they also get scanned by a dart. And this means that they get completely stalled and are not able to follow the Yoru into sight. This makes them afraid to actually push through the smoke and sort of, re-clear the front of sight, and it delays their hit by quite a few seconds. For a lot of agents, this would be a problem, because right now is when the other agents, like Omen and Astra, their smokes would be dropping. But with Brimstone, he gets an additional 4.5 seconds about. And so you can see that when they do finally get into the site, the extra smoke duration actually gives them protection from long lines from the operator or other players on defense flooding in to help. So that extra little bit of smoke duration is a huge deal. And then there's one more smoke that they can drop for an additional, almost 20 seconds of vision block, which allows them to set up into their post plan. And in round 20, we're finally going to get to see Forsaken use his ultimate. And, it's just always fun to look at sort of the coverage of these big AoE ultimates, which is actually pretty good. This is a huge spot for defenders to play on the back of A site, and the orbital strike basically clears the entire area so that his team can scale in safely once it is over. And so while we won't go over it right now, you can see similar sort of theory being approached on a map like Abyss, where Gentlemates is using Brimstone as well. The long duration one way, the ability to reactively smoke, and of course, pairing the Brimstone with a second smoker who's responsible for the rest of the map. Very, very similar sort of approach. And on the attack side, again, the ability to explode and play post plant is really good on a map where people basically have to play retake because it's just too wide to play defense effectively.